The Steamie, a politics podcast from the Scotsman. Hello and welcome to The Steamie, the Scotsman's politics podcast. I'm Alistair Grant, the political editor of the Scotsman. It's their first Westminster by-election victory in more than 50 years. The Scottish Conservatives have thumped the SNP to gain Aberdeen South after a contest dominated by the debate over the future of North Sea oil and gas. Meanwhile, the SNP won a separate by-election in Arbroath and Broughty Ferry, and down south, Andy Burnham comfortably won the Makerfield by-election, paving the way for him to challenge Sir Keir Starmer for the leadership. It was a huge, consequential night in British politics, and to discuss it, I'm joined by Rachel Amery, the Scotsman's politics correspondent, and by David Bol, the Scotsman's deputy political editor. And Rachel, you were at the count in Aberdeen South. Talk us through it. When did it become clear that the SNP were on course to lose?
Yeah, so at the very beginning of the night when we first arrived, both the SNP and the Conservatives seemed to be cautiously optimistic. It's always the phrase that's used in elections, isn't it? Cautiously optimistic. So the first sort of hour or so, they both kind of felt kind of equal, but it became quite apparent very, very quickly that the SNP were not going to be able to hold on to this. So the postal votes got counted pretty much as soon as the polls closed at 10. Someone was telling me that the Conservatives had double the number of postal votes the SNP had. So already, right from the beginning, it was looking a bit shaky for the SNP. And then as the ballots keep coming through, you could see the piles on the tables, and the piles for Douglas Lumsden as the Conservatives just kept going up and kept going up. And not only did it become quite clear that they were going to win this by-election, but win by some margin. Like we all thought that whoever was going to win, it would be quite a close contest. There wouldn't be much in it. We were even talking earlier, like, would there have to be a recount because of how close it is? And it wasn't close at all. So I've got the numbers here. Douglas Lumsden got 14,308. That's up 25% on their vote share from 2024. And the SNP, 8,258, down 4%. So that's a massive victory. It's not close at all, which is what we were thinking it would be. So a huge success for the Conservatives, and it's also their first gain at a Westminster by-election in Scotland since 1967. That really highlights just how historic this win is for them.
Yeah, I think that's just incredible. I mean, I was reading this morning that the Conservatives last won a Westminster by-election in Scotland in 1973. That was when they held Edinburgh North. But as you were saying there, they've not gained a seat at Westminster by-election north of the border since 1967, when they won Glasgow Pollock from Labour. So that just emphasises how unusual this is and how sort of, I suppose, how much of an upset it is. But I mean, presumably you were obviously at the count until the early hours of the morning. You've darted back home. What were the Tories and the SNP saying immediately after the result became clear? What were they saying in their kind of speeches afterwards?
Yeah, Douglas Lumsden, absolutely delighted. You could see the joy on his face when he won this seat. And this is very much for the Conservatives being a referendum North Sea oil and gas. And so, as you probably expect, they immediately wanted to talk about that. So he was saying that the SNP needs to really sit up and take some notes from this result. He was pointing to the fact that the Scottish Government's energy strategy is somewhat late. I know, David, that's one of your own bugbears, is this energy strategy. So he was saying that the fact that it is so late has probably contributed to this, the fact that there's not a clear position from the SNP, although there is still this presumption against new oil and gas licences. So very much try to send a message to the SNP of, you need to change your energy policy, and what you're doing right now on energy and North Sea oil and gas isn't working. Now, Richard Thompson from the SNP, a slightly different tone from himself. He obviously conceded defeat and said that, look, the Conservatives threw everything they had at it. They had to throw so many resources and we just couldn't stand up to that. But he then also decided to blame media, particularly broadcast media, for not serving the people of Aberdeen South particularly well with the coverage of this by-election, which I'm not sure was particularly fair. I think a few people were taken aback by that comment from Richard Thompson when he first came off the stage after losing this by-election. So interesting comments from both of them on what they plan to do. But I spoke to Douglas Lumsden. Well, Douglas, congratulations. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling absolutely delighted. what a huge victory it is tonight. To get almost 50% of the vote is like beyond my wildest expectations, and it just shows you that we had a good campaign, good clear messaging, and the people of Aberdeen South came out and backed the Scottish Conservatives tonight.
You made this into a referendum on the oil and gas industry. Do you think that is what has given you the victory tonight?
I think that'll give us a huge boost. There was two things: a referendum on oil and gas and stop the SNP. And in terms of oil and gas, this is a clear signal from the people of Aberdeen South that we should back that industry. While we've got a need for oil and gas, it's better for our jobs, better for the economy, and better for the environment that we actually produce it in this country, rather than rely on imports from elsewhere. So yeah, I think it's a clear signal that we've sent out.
And what about the signal it sends to the SNP?
They need to rethink their energy policy. While I've been an MSP, I've been asking for their energy strategy for the last 3 years, and they haven't produced it. So far, they've still got a presumption against new oil and gas. They need to change that because we're losing so much jobs in Aberdeen, and they need to sort of back the economy and back the industry, because it's a win. If we can back that industry, it will give us huge benefits in terms of revenue. So they need to take note of this.
And how are you going to be celebrating this weekend?
Well, I believe my new boss, Kemi, will be up at the weekend. So we'll be doing that, and there may be other celebration events that we will maybe plan. Because it'll be a big thank you for it. There's so many people came and helped during this campaign, and we need to enjoy it. We need to celebrate it. But the hard work does start next week when I get down to Westminster. It's it's quite a big burden, actually, having the thought that I will be the person representing Aberdeen South, but it's something I'm looking forward to, and I'll be banging the drum for Aberdeen while I'm down in Westminster at every single occasion.
You're going to miss Holyrood?
I'm looking forward to the new challenge ahead. I think that's probably the best thing to say.
Okay, Douglas Lumsden, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you can see there, he's very excited, looking forward to getting down to Westminster, and very much wants to talk all things oil and gas.
Yeah, I love that Richard Thompson stuff. If in doubt, blame the media. It's always the way. But of course, this was often referred to as a referendum on oil and gas. It was, as I was saying earlier, dominated by the debate over the North Sea. Stephen Flynn, whose decision to swap Westminster for Holyrood at the Scottish election last month sparked this by-election, had some quite pointed comments, I thought, on social media. He said it was a tough night in Aberdeen that some will need to reflect on quite heavily. David, what do you think the ramifications of this will be for that energy policy and for the kind of tightrope that the SNP has been walking on this issue?
Yeah, I think a tightrope is the perfect way to describe it, really, because the irony here is that the SNP and the Tories aren't actually that far away on oil and gas policy, but the Conservatives have quite happily owned it. They're quite proud of it, whereas the SNP wanting to sit on a fence about it and kind of give some voters the impression that they are more concerned with the climate. We know in the Holyrood election, they lost quite a few voters to the Greens. Their vote share was down where the Greens was up. But they also in Aberdeen obviously want to make that message clear that they support the industry. And John Swinney has tried to do that, but not explicitly. And as Rachel mentioned, the Scottish Government hasn't published a final energy strategy since 2007. And that presumption against oil and gas, which was a draft policy, if they wanted to get rid of that, because it is quite stark, and particularly in Aberdeen, surely the best way to do that is to bring forward an energy strategy that doesn't have it in. But they've had ample time to do it and just refused, and it's obviously hit them hard. It is a tricky one because obviously Labour are the ones who are taking most of the wrath of the oil and gas policy. At Westminster, they have vowed to ban new licences. The energy profits levy, ironically brought in by the Tories, has been continued by Labour. So they should really take the brunt of the kind of upset in the industry. But the SNP have been the target for this, and this was an opportunity for people in that industry and in that part of the world to show that there are issues here and that people care, and it was taken out on the SNP.
And of course, Rachel, Stephen Flynn might want to reflect a little bit on his own role in this. I mean, ultimately, he sparked this by-election by making that switch to Holyrood. A lot of people suspect that the primary motivation for that is his own leadership ambitions and kind of manoeuvring himself into the sort of centre of power in the SNP in Holyrood. And now they've lost Aberdeen South in quite a kind of historic way. So, yeah, do you think he'll have regrets, or do you think he'll just view this as, these things happen, we'll win it back eventually?
Well, already the SNP, even before the final result was announced, were telling journalists, we'll win this seat back in 2029, it's okay. But yeah, I think maybe the self-reflection needs to happen there from Stephen Flynn as well, because yeah, if he hadn't wanted to make that move, this wouldn't have happened for the party. And there has already been some questions about his own ambitions, particularly with how the selection came around for his Aberdeen D-side seat in Holyrood. And I think now that this has happened too, when it becomes to the point where we are starting to see him making moves and making steps towards perhaps becoming next First Minister, this is perhaps something that people might question. Is it, well, wait a minute, how far does your ambition go? Look at how many people you've had to sort of step over and sort of try and get one over to get to this point. And now also losing a seat to the Conservatives is going to be attached to that as well. So it's not great for Stephen Flynn and his personal ambitions, and it'll probably be something that will stick around because not only have the SNP lost the seat, losing to the Conservatives will be particularly sore for them.
And was when you were speaking to Richard Thompson after the result, was he saying anything specific about the sort of SNP's policy in oil and gas? They need to have another look at this. They need to sort of come out with a firm position?
Not when I spoke to him. He was very much sort of concentrating on the fact that the Conservatives put in a massive, massive fight here, and that is why they didn't win. So nothing particularly in oil and gas from him when I spoke to him.
And we should touch on as well, because I know you were covering this, you weren't at the count, but you were covering it overnight. Arbroath and Broughty Ferry, we can't ignore it entirely. It's not as interesting a contest, there's no doubt about that. It's not as much of a news line, but still a very comfortable win for the SNP. What were the party saying about that?
Yeah, we were expecting the SNP to win Arbroath and Broughty Ferry. It's very much SNP heartlands, and they did. Lara Bird got 9,802. The Conservatives came second with 4,524, and Reform were actually just behind them on 4,341. So a very comfortable win for the SNP. And later today, I believe John Swinney is heading out to the constituency to celebrate that win as well. One thing that was quite interesting about both Aberdeen South and Arbroath and Broughty Ferry is Scottish Labour aren't really anywhere to be seen here. I think they've come fourth in both those elections. Particularly surprising that they came second in 2024 in Aberdeen South. So we know they didn't put very much effort into these by-elections. They certainly were very, very quiet when it came to campaigning. But if it was ever a sort of sign that the Labour vote in Scotland is really collapsing, this really was it. The vote share that they got in Aberdeen South actually fell by 19% in Aberdeen South. That is a massive drop for the Labour Party. I don't know have the exact figures for what their drop was in Arbroath, but I'm going to guess it was not good news for them either, considering how far behind they were against the Conservatives and Reform UK. So while they had a great night down in Makerfield, and that's where a lot of their efforts were going, Labour did not have a good night in Scotland at all, just continuing the woes for Anna Sarwar and trying to sort of see where the party goes now for them. That's not good for the Labour Party at all in either by-election here.
On the subject of Makerfield, sorry.
Oh, and also as well, I think one thing as well it showed in Aberdeen South was there's a lot of tactical voting happening. Very little votes going to Labour, not many going to Reform either, and it was very clear that the Unionist parties were rallying around the Conservatives to lock the SNP out. That became very obvious very early on in the night.
On the subject of Makerfield, we should obviously talk about this spectacular result for Andy Burnham. It's going to have huge ramifications. As everyone knows about, it's been all over the media. He won 55% of the vote, way ahead of Reform UK's Robert Kenyon. I mean, David, I suppose the Scottish angle on this is what a potential change in the leadership down south would mean for Scottish Labour, because as everyone knows, Andy Burnham has been running in this seat to sort of pave the way for a leadership challenge to Keir Starmer, paved the way to Downing Street. The Scottish Labour suffered at the Holyrood election largely because of the massive unpopularity of the UK Labour government, the massive unpopularity of Keir Starmer in particular. Do you think there's hopes in the party that Andy Burnham, if he does manage to challenge Keir Starmer successfully, do you think there's hopes that that could make a difference north of the border?
Yeah, I think there's hopes that will happen, but I mean, it's going to be a bit of a mess, isn't it? Let's be honest. Whatever happens, it does feel. I don't like to predict things, but it does feel like a leadership challenge at least is inevitable now, and who knows? He could be the prime minister. So we know Anna Sawa and him are close. They get on. So I think he'll be hoping that he can give him something positive to cling to if there are big changes. But if he does become Prime Minister, Andy Burnham's going to have a long list of stuff to sort out. And whether helping Scottish Labour recover is top of that priority list is unlikely. But it will give them a fresh kind of a clean slate, as it were, and they can pin a lot on Keir Starmer if he does go. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be a positive move. I think most people in Anna Sawa's inner circle would be quite pleased with an Andy Burnham leadership at Westminster. They've obviously burnt their bridges with Keir Starmer as well, so they're not going to get any help off the current leadership. So yeah, that's positive for Scottish Labour, but whether that will actually provide them with anything that remotely shows that they can win again is another matter, because I don't think it's going to be a quick change, and before you know it, they'll be gearing up for the Westminster election. So yes, positive, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what actually happens there and what impact it will have on Anna Sawa. It may indicate that he might stay on a bit longer. If we're talking about him potentially resigning, he might wait and see. It might wait to the end of the year, for example, to see whether the landscape is a bit more positive for him to just carry on. So that might be the most obvious thing we see straight away.
Sorry, Rachel, what is it you wanted to, well, hopefully just cut this bit of the video. What is it you wanted me to ask you?
Oh, just as a sort of fun wee bit about the Greens in Aberdeen, if I could get that in somehow.
All right, yeah, I'll do that now. And Rachel, we should also mention the other parties involved in these contests, and particularly in by-election in Aberdeen, for example. How did the other parties, such as the Greens, fare?
Yes, with the Greens and the Lib Dems, both who did very well at the Scottish Parliament election, both standing in Aberdeen South. The Lib Dems were also in Arbroath and Broughty. I mean, we're talking very small numbers here, not particularly exciting in terms of that. But one thing I thought was interesting was Ross Greer, the party's co-leader, was actually at the count in Aberdeen South. And I went to go and speak to him and say, why are you here? This is not a big seat for you. You're not likely to win this seat. And it was very interesting the reason why he was there. So next week there is a council by-election in Aberdeen for George Street and Harbour. He's hoping the Green Party will do well there, and to the point where that next year's local elections, the Greens will win a seat in that ward. And so he was coming and just watching the boxes from George Street and Harbour to see how they done in that ward. He wasn't watching any other boxes. He wasn't caring what the result for the Green Party was in any other part. He just wanted to see those boxes to see if he's on course to win a council seat at next year's local election in Aberdeen. That's very, very niche, very dedicated to the cause. But I thought that was quite a fun, quirky thing as to why a party leader of a party that was definitely not going to win was appearing at this count last night.
Well, there you go. That's commitment. But that's all we've got time for. But please do stay tuned to the Scotsman's website for all the latest news, comment, analysis. Plenty of coverage from Rachel on those by-elections, particularly Aberdeen South, having been at the count. We'll have loads of coverage about what this means. We'll also have coverage about what Makerfield might mean in terms of Scotland. But yeah, until next week, thank you very much for listening or watching. The Steamie, a politics podcast from the Scotsman.